They kept pushing their snow into my driveway, and at first I told myself it was nothing, just one of those small winter annoyances you don't really fight, you just deal with. But the thing about small annoyances is they don't stay small when someone keeps choosing you as the easiest option. I live on a quiet corner in a town where winter isn't just a season, it's a way of life. The kind of place where people wave even if they don't know you. Where you learn early that a good shovel and a decent snowblower matter more than most things in January. My place sits right at the edge of a narrow private lane that leads into a small townhouse complex. Nothing fancy, just a handful of units packed close together with a shared parking lot and their own contracted plow service. The first storm that year came early. Heavy, wet snow that fell overnight and turned everything into that bright, silent world you only get after a big snowfall. I woke up, made coffee, looked out the window, and there it was, a ridge of snow sitting right at the end of my driveway, about a foot high, maybe a little more, packed down and slightly icy. Now, if you've lived anywhere with real winters, you know that ridge. It's normal. City plow goes by, pushes snow off the street, and whatever's in the way gets piled up at the curb, including your driveway. It's annoying, sure, but it's just part of the deal, so I didn't think twice. I grabbed my shovel, bundled up, and spent maybe 15-20 minutes breaking it apart, clearing just enough space to back my car out. Cold air, quiet morning, the usual routine. Nothing worth remembering. A couple days later, another storm rolled in. Heavier this time, longer, the kind that doesn't stop all day, just keeps layering and layering until everything feels buried. When it finally cleared, I stepped outside again, and that's when I paused. The ridge was back, but this time it wasn't a ridge. It was a wall easily 2 feet high, dense, packed so tight it didn't even look like snow anymore. More like someone had poured concrete across the end of my driveway and let it freeze overnight. I remember just standing there for a second, shovel in hand, staring at it like, how is this even possible? It took me almost an hour to clear enough to get my car out. Not clean, not neat, just enough to break a path through it. My shoulders were burning, gloves soaked, breath fogging up in front of me. And somewhere in the middle of that, I started noticing something that didn't sit right. Because the pile, it wasn't shaped like a normal plow pass. It was angled, layered in a way that didn't match the street. And more importantly, it was coming in from the side, not just straight ahead. That's when I looked over toward the townhouse lane, and for the first time, I really paid attention. The next snowfall, I didn't rush outside right away. I made coffee, stood by the front window, and waited. Just watched the road like I had nothing better to do. It sounds ridiculous now, but something in my gut was telling me this wasn't just bad luck. About 30 minutes after the snow started sticking, I saw him. A pickup truck with a mounted plow blade turning into the townhouse lane, headlights cutting through the snowfall, engine low and steady. He made a few passes through their lot, clearing space efficiently, pushing snow into neat lines along the edges. Nothing unusual there. But then when he reached the end of their lane, right where it met my driveway, he slowed down. I remember leaning a little closer to the glass without even realizing it, like somehow that would change what I was seeing. He angled the blade just slightly at first, then more deliberately, and pushed the entire load of snow straight toward the edge, my edge, right across the invisible line where their property met mine. A clean, open entrance for them, a growing wall for me. I stood there for a second, just watching as he backed up, adjusted, and did it again. Smooth, practiced, like it was something he'd done 100 times before. And maybe he had. At that point, I wasn't even angry yet. Not fully. It was more like disbelief, mixed with that slow realization that, okay, this isn't random anymore. This is a choice. So the next time I saw him, I walked over. It was later that afternoon. Snow had stopped, and he was finishing up one last pass. I waited until he parked near the entrance, engine still running, and I waved him down. He rolled the window halfway, looked at me like he already knew what I was going to say. "Hey," I started, keeping my tone calm. "You've been pushing snow into my driveway." He glanced past me toward the street, then back at me. No surprise, No confusion, just a shrug. I'm just following the easiest push line, he said. That's how it's done around here. I remember blinking at that, not because I didn't understand, but because of how casually he said it. The easiest for who? I asked. He gave a half smile. Not rude exactly, but not respectful either. Look, man, he said, tapping the steering wheel lightly. Everybody does it. Snow's gotta go somewhere. I let that sit for a second. Yeah, I said finally. Just not in my driveway. There was a pause, short but noticeable. He nodded once like he'd heard me, like maybe it registered. All right, he said. I'll keep that in mind. And then he drove off. For a moment, I actually believed that was it. One conversation, problem solved. That's how things usually work in places like this. You talk, people adjust, everyone moves on. But winter has a way of testing that kind of optimism, because the next storm came, and everything got worse. The next storm didn't just bring snow, it brought clarity, because whatever doubt I had left, whatever part of me still wanted to believe that maybe it was all just coincidence, disappeared the moment I stepped outside and saw the end of my driveway buried again, deeper this time, wider, like someone had doubled down on a decision. And that's the thing about repeated behavior. Once it happens enough times, it stops feeling accidental and starts feeling intentional. I didn't even grab the shovel right away. I just stood there, hands in my pockets, staring at it, replaying that conversation in my head. I'll keep that in mind. Yeah, clearly not. So instead of reacting, I decided to observe. The next snowfall, I went back to my spot by the window, coffee in hand, lights off so I wouldn't reflect in the glass. And right on schedule, that same truck rolled in, blade down, engine steady, like a machine that didn't think twice about what it was doing. He cleared their lane again, same pattern, same efficiency. And when he got to the end, he didn't hesitate. Not even a second. Blade angled, snow pushed straight into my driveway entrance like it belonged there. That was the moment something shifted in me. Not anger, not yet. Just a kind of quiet decision. Like, all right, if this is how we're doing it, then I'm gonna start keeping track. I walked over again later that day, but this time, he didn't even bother pretending it was new information. You're still pushing it into my driveway, I said. He leaned back in his seat, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the door. Yeah, he said almost casually. But it's just the edge, right? You can clear that. I remember letting out a small breath like I was trying to keep the situation from tipping over. That's not the point, I said. You're making extra work for me every time. He shrugged again. Same shrug. Look, I've got a whole lot to clear. I can't be worrying about every driveway. There it was. Not malicious, just indifferent. And somehow that made it worse, because now it wasn't about a mistake. It was about convenience. His convenience at my expense. So I escalated. Not aggressively, just officially. I reached out to the townhouse management, a woman named Karen Hull, mid-50s, very composed, the kind of voice that always sounds like it's explaining something, even when it's not. I kept it simple, explained what was happening, told her I'd already spoken to the driver, asked if they could just make sure he stopped using my driveway as a dumping spot. There was a pause on the phone, papers shifting in the background. Our plow company is very experienced, she said finally. They wouldn't intentionally block a residential driveway. I almost laughed at that, not because it was funny, but because I had literally watched it happen. I've seen him do it, I said more than once. Well, she replied, tone tightening just a little. The city plow often creates buildup at driveway entrances. It's a common issue this time of year. There it was, the deflection. It's not the city plow, I said slower now. It's coming from your lane. Another pause. I'll make a note of your concern, she said. But I can assure you this is standard winter impact. Standard? That word stuck with me, because what she meant was, this is normal and you should just deal with it. That night, I sat in my garage longer than usual, just looking at the edge of the driveway, thinking about how many times I'd cleared it already, how many more times I would if nothing changed. And that's when I decided If they needed something clear, I'd make it impossible to ignore. Before the next storm, I went out and bought a set of bright orange driveway markers. The tall kind, reflective, impossible to miss, even in heavy snow. I spaced them evenly along the edge of my driveway, right where their lane met mine. No ambiguity, no guessing, a clear line. When the storm hit, I was back at the window. Same truck, same routine. But this time, when he approached the end of the lane, he slowed down. I could see it, that moment of hesitation. His headlights passed over the markers, lighting them up like warning signs. For a second I thought, okay, maybe this works. Maybe this is all it takes. He adjusted the blade, paused, and then he pushed anyway. Straight through the markers. Snow rolled over them, burying half of them completely, bending one slightly as the weight packed in. I just stood there watching, not even surprised anymore. That was it. No more assumptions, no more conversations. Now I needed proof. The next day I set up a small camera. Nothing fancy, just a basic outdoor cam mounted near my garage, angled toward the driveway entrance. It didn't cover everything, but it covered enough. 2 storms later, I had it. Clear footage finishing their lane, turning the blade, and using my driveway like an extension of their snowbank. Over and over. Clean, deliberate passes. I clipped the footage, grabbed a few still frames, and sent it all to the Townhouse Association. Short email. No emotion, just facts. This is happening. Here's the evidence. Please address it. And then I waited. A day passed. Nothing. 2 days. Still nothing. No reply. No acknowledgement. Not even a, "we'll look into it." That silence, it said more than anything they could have written. Because now it wasn't just the driver. It was the whole system around him, choosing not to care. And that's when something changed in me again. Not frustration this time. Something quieter, sharper. I stopped thinking about how to stop them, and started thinking about how to respond. See, up to that point I'd been playing defense, clearing what they left behind, trying to reason with them, hoping they'd adjust, but they hadn't. So, I walked into my garage, looked over at my snowblower, and for the first time that winter, I really appreciated what it could do. It wasn't one of those small electric ones. This thing was gas-powered, heavy-duty, the kind that doesn't just move snow, it launches it 30 feet, easy, maybe more if the snow's light. I remember running my hand along the handle, almost absent-mindedly, and a thought crossed my mind that felt simple, not angry, not even petty, just fair. If snow had to go somewhere, then maybe it should go back to where it came from. The next storm came a couple nights later, right on schedule. He cleared their lane, pushed everything into my driveway, built himself another perfect, clean entrance, at my expense. And this time, I didn't touch it. I let it sit there all day, heavy, packed, exactly how he left it. Neighbors came and went, cars passed, the sun dipped low, and I just waited, because timing matters. By evening, their lot was clear, cars neatly parked, edges cleaned up, everything looking exactly the way they wanted it. That's when I stepped outside. Cold air, quiet street, that stillness you only get after dark and winter. I pulled the starter cord once, twice. The engine roared to life, and for the first time since this whole thing started, I smiled. The sound of that engine, it cut straight through the quiet, like it had something to say. Not loud in an obnoxious way, just steady, confident, like it knew exactly what it was about to do. I let it idle for a second, watching my breath in the cold air, looking at that pile sitting at the end of my driveway. The same pile I'd cleared over and over again, storm after storm, like it was my responsibility. And for the first time, I didn't see it as a problem. I saw it as material. I stepped forward, lowered the chute, angled it just slightly, not toward the street, not toward my yard, but toward the edge of their lot, right along the line where their snowbank had been so carefully stacked earlier that day. Then I eased the machine forward. The auger bit into the pile with that deep grinding crunch, dense snow breaking apart, feeding into the chute, and then it flew. A clean arc of white, launching across the boundary, landing exactly where it would have, if he had just chosen a different angle to begin with. I worked slowly, deliberately, not rushing, not dumping it all in one place, just spreading it evenly, layer by layer, returning every bit of what had been pushed onto my property back to theirs. There was something almost meditative about it. The rhythm of the machine, the steady push forward, the controlled sweep of the chute, like I was correcting a pattern that had been out of balance for weeks. I made sure of one thing, though. No cars, no walkways, no doors, just the empty edges, the same kind of space he had used on my side. Only now, it was theirs. It took about 40 minutes. By the time I shut the machine off, the pile was gone. My driveway entrance clean, open like it should have been all along. And their lot. Not ruined, just tighter, subtly but noticeably tighter. I stood there for a second, listening as the engine ticked down, looking at the line I'd just redrawn, without saying a word to anyone. Then I went inside. No announcement, no message, just balance restored. The next morning, I didn't even need to check. I heard it, that same truck, that same engine pulling into their lane earlier than usual. I stepped to the window, coffee in hand, and sure enough, there he was. But this time his movements were different, slower, more deliberate. He cleared the lot. But when he got to the edges, the spots I'd filled back in, he had to redo them, push snow back, widen the spaces again, clean up the lines that had been tightened overnight. I watched him for a while, not with anger, not even with satisfaction exactly, just curiosity, because now he knew, and more importantly, he knew that I knew. That afternoon my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it ring once, twice, then picked up. Hello? A pause, then a familiar voice. This is Karen Hull, from the Maple Ridge Townhomes. Of course it was. Yes, I said. Neutral. Another pause, like she was choosing her words carefully this time. We've received a report that snow from your driveway was relocated onto our property last night. Relocated. I almost smiled at that. I wouldn't call it relocated, I said. I call it returned. Silence. Not the dismissive kind from before. This one had weight to it. I see, she said finally, her tone noticeably different now. Less certain, less polished. Well, that's creating complications for our residents. I leaned back slightly, letting that sit between us for a second. Yeah, I said, it's been creating complications for me too. Another pause, longer this time. What exactly would you like us to do? She asked. And there it was. Not a denial, not a deflection, a question. I kept my voice calm. Simple, the same way I had from the beginning. Tell your plow driver to stop using my driveway as a dump site, I said, and put that in writing. No hesitation this time. That seems reasonable, she replied, but I wasn't done. And one more thing, I added, a slight shift on the other end, like she already knew there was more. If it keeps happening, I said, I'm going to start billing your association for snow removal, because at that point, I'm doing part of your job. That landed. I could hear it in the silence that followed, not offended, not defensive, just understood. That won't be necessary, she said. Finally, I'll speak with the contractor today. We ended the call there. No tension, no argument, just clarity. The next storm came a few days later, and like clockwork, the truck showed up again, blade down, engine steady. I went to the window, same spot, same coffee. But this time, I wasn't watching for proof. I was watching for change. He cleared their lane, same as always, pushing snow cleanly along the sides. Then he approached the end, my driveway, that invisible line. He slowed down just like before, but this time he turned the blade the other way. Snow rolled away from my driveway, back into their designated bank, exactly where it should have been from the start. No spillover, no ridge, no wall. Just respect for the boundary that had been there all along. I stood there for a second, watching him finish the pass, then move on like it was nothing. Like it had always been done that way. And maybe for him it had. Convenience isn't something people question until it stops being convenient. After that, things stayed quiet. Storms came and went. Snow fell, got cleared, life went on, and my driveway stayed exactly how it should have been. Clear, simple, normal. But every now and then, when I'd look out at the end of the driveway after a storm, I'd think about how easily that whole situation could have gone a different way. If I kept clearing it without saying anything, if I'd accepted that standard winter impact line, if I'd just let someone else's convenience keep becoming my problem, nothing would have changed. And that's the part that stuck with me, because it wasn't really about snow. It was about boundaries, about what people do when they think no one's going to push back. When the easiest way quietly shifts the burden onto someone else, and how quickly that changes the moment it comes back to them. Funny thing is, snow only seems to flow one direction until it doesn't, until someone decides it's going both ways now. So, I don't know. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe I should have just let it go, kept my head down, shoveled a little longer each time, and called it part of winter. Or maybe sometimes the only way to fix a problem is to let people feel exactly what they've been causing. I'll let you decide that. If you've ever dealt with neighbors, shared spaces, or someone pushing their problems onto you, I'm curious, would you have done the same thing? Or would you have handled it differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read more of them than you'd think. And if you made it this far, you already know the deal. Hit like, subscribe, and stick around, because sometimes the smallest conflicts tell the biggest stories.